I think, which is kind of linked to the idea of success for me, is just being in love with your vision, your work.
What's good, creatives? Welcome back to Creative Haven, where I interview today's most burgeoning and awesome creatives and artists and some of my talented friends and people who have inspired me in my life, and hopefully they will inspire you as well. And today on this show I have Marcus, a street philosopher as well as a serial entrepreneur, and to me such a great friend and an artist and creative himself that has shown me so much about spirituality and art and hip-hop and how that all intersects and has helped his life and can help others' lives. And we geek out on hip-hop. You know, I'm a DJ. You know, I used to break. I consider myself a b-boy. I tag. I MC and flow when I want to. So I love hip-hop. And Marcus actually created this line of chocolate called hip-hop chocolates. And it's these chocolates that are in the shape of different hip-hop, I would say, icons or shapes and stereos and sneakers. And I'm just going to let Marcus introduce himself, man. He's just so cool.
Oh, Mitchell, you're the coolest, man. Thank you for that amazing introduction. I've had very few introductions, but that definitely is the top two.
Yes! You know what? I try. This is only my third podcast, so I'm trying.
I really appreciate the opportunity to share my story, my little story. But yeah, I guess we could start with hip-hop chocolate. So hip-hop chocolate came from a paper that I wrote in college.
Okay.
Which came from a series of experiences. I won't call it psychedelic, kind of spiritual experiences I had kind of interacting with the hip-hop culture, with a perspective through the lens of religion and through the lens of kind of a philosophy of intuition and of self-initiation. So I wrote a paper called The Physics of Hip-Hop, which actually helped me get into a program in Boston that gave me access to Harvard Divinity, gave me access to Boston College, all of these schools where I was able to get a kind of cross-section curriculum of religion. So I was being trained to be a Christian apologeticist, and based on this paper that I began, which was only 6 pages.
Okay.
So the idea in this paper, The Physics of Hip Hop, was that hip hop culture, mind you, this was in like 98. That hip hop culture was not only like a spiritual movement, but it was specifically a means. It could be used as a tool for initiation into adulthood.
That's beautiful. Wow.
And it was a meditation that I had for a long time, because just reflecting on my own life and the way I grew up and the way a lot of maybe disenfranchised people of color or grow up, they really don't have a reference, especially men, on when they become an adult. You know, for women, it could be when you begin to menstruate or even have a child. You can. That's a point in your life as a woman where you may feel that you've crossed over into this realm of adulthood. But for men, it's like it's kind of like a kind of anamorphic field of just perspective and societal ideas that you feel like you really, unless you create the opportunity to become an adult, you really aren't sure, you know, these days in Western civilization. And because I had always been interested in philosophy and religion, which would lead me into like talking about like how I grew up, but because of the way I grew up, which really quickly was it was tumultuous. My mom was in a biker gang. I grew up as a child like sleeping in bars and under pool tables behind bars. Me and my sister took care of each other, and because of that, I think I had like there was something in me that that was like there has to be more. Like my urge to know like more about the nature of reality and just seeking. I became a mystic really early. I was just really and with that came like how do I grow? How do I get better? And these ideas through middle school, everything that I touched had to do with like me kind of discovering, like every artist, who they are and how they can kind of speak. You know, you use a tool, you use an instrument, you use a pencil, you use your legs to dance, to kind of see yourself outside yourself. But there was a point where I was like, how do you track that? How do you know that you're like not only progressing, but am I becoming a man? Am I becoming like what I want to become, but what society needs me to become to be like a participant and contribute on a really like just on a level that I feel like I can contribute. And so this question came up, and just growing up in the hip hop culture and seeing how powerful it is and how it's done just that.
Exactly.
So I feel like all I did as a street philosopher was kind of look at what was already happening.
Yeah.
And I think that's what happens with a lot of artists and scientists. They just, especially comedians, I'm really fascinated with comedians, but you just see what's happening.
Observe.
Yeah, and translate it, and that's what I was doing. So I wrote kind of a prose paper based on this idea that hip-hop wasn't, this was like before KRS-One wrote his book, so it was like I had no reference, but I was really talking to myself, explaining how hip-hop culture was a way to, through the ciphers, as a dancer, you enter into the cipher and you are initiating yourself into manhood. It's comparable to like in South America or Africa, the indigenous cultures where they will scarify you, or you have to run over a row of cows, or like there's all kinds of things that happen in these indigenous cultures that take the boy away from his mother and introduce him to manhood.
Yeah.
But in hip hop is the only thing that I can see happening. I mean, that is like arguable, but like I think there is something that happens in the Western consciousness of the youth, especially boys, like extreme culture itself. Like I grew up skateboarding, throwing yourself off a roof to see like what you're made of. I think all of those things are part of self-initiation.
That's true.
And yeah, hip hop is the greatest self-initiator.
I'm so passionate about hip hop. I'm so happy that we're talking about this subject, because the idea of hip hop these days is really tied to rap and gangster rap and trap now. And so the culture of hip hop, I would say, has been kind of lost in the shuffle of mainstream media and how the press has documented hip hop the past couple of years.
Wow.
When I say when I was growing up in the 90s, 80s and 90s, hip hop was this culture. It was these four elements, expressive, artistic art forms. Like it was DJing, it was MCing, it was breaking, and then break dancing to people out there. We say breaking, right? And MCing. Did I say that? They all four? MCing, breaking, graffiti, and DJing.
Yeah.
Yes, all four. And what I loved about what you said is that those four art forms that make up the culture, there's a lot of, arguments out there about all the other elements. They are all about self-expression. And what's also very prominent in the hip-hop culture is battle.
Yes.
And the battle and the cipher. And what you said was self-initiation and the idea of putting yourself out in the cipher.
Wow.
It's the idea of vulnerability.
Yes.
And that idea of vulnerability, it puts you in a situation of, do you step up as a man or do you cower as a boy? And there's a lot of, you can go really deep into,
there's like nuances, definitely.
Yeah, the idea of the men and boys or whatnot. I love how you put that. in perspective through the eyes of hip hop, because it's true. That's the idea of being fresh, of being an individual,
right?
The idea of being a man, and as a child, as a kid, and as a boy in hip hop, like in your teens. And I remember because I did it through breaking, jumping in a cipher.
Me too.
That
was my first.
That's vulnerability to the max.
Terrified.
And then the next step was for me was MCing. Getting roasted in a rap battle, in a freestyle battle, is the most embarrassing thing in the whole world. And then of course there's DJing. If you're whack as a DJ and you train wreck up in front of everyone,
oh man,
you find yourself in the most embarrassing situation. And it isn't a self-initiation.
Yeah.
What it teaches you is to hone your craft.
Yeah. And that's a part of being, an adult, but also I think men in particular need that. They need purpose. They need to feel fulfilled, but they also need to perfect something, to have work, have something to work on. And hip hop gave, not just a generation, it gave the whole world kind of a container to work on themselves, or to give coherence to their consciousness in a way. I just saw how magical and almost sci-fi it is that these things are happening intuitively. All this stuff is made. Hip hop was invented by kids. Intuitively they were searching for something that will pull them into their higher self. And I saw that is spirituality. All the spirituality I'd studied even in school didn't compare to, the high spirituality of hip hop at its core. And I like what you said about its evolution has brought us to a place where it's kind of dovetailed with commerce, which happens even with religion. It's happened with Catholicism, Islam, every religion, except for some of the isms like Buddhism haven't really have a relationship with commerce like that. But it definitely causes an evolution. But I still think that self-initiation is there, and to some degree. But hip hop, I still see it as it's kind of like I'm going to say a sleeper vehicle. There's something very innocent about it, but inside of the seed of hip hop is this profundity that I still think we're all unwrapping, which is why it's entered commerce. It's almost like a Trojan horse. And so me kind of identifying, I just feeling through the culture helped me to see other cultures. Like I was a big raver in high school. I would go to raves, and I saw before I was introduced to thinkers like Terence McKenna or even Alan Watts or Joseph Campbell or Robert Anton Wilson, like people who were a part of the hippie movement and spoke about techno shamanism and how people electronic music being a way to enter trance states. And I was involved with that, and I saw how that too, not even even though it's not connected to hip hop, it's a way for not only self-initiation but for self-refinement. And that's a whole other conversation as far as the function of shamanism and but from that idea and from this world where hip hop is a place where humanity can have self-reflection, I created hip-hop chocolates, which is just as bizarre to me. Even when I had the first thought, I was I had no reason to come up with that thought, but the idea was just to create a communion, like a Catholic communion, where you could put the actual culture in your body. And there was that idea first before it was chocolate. How do I put hip-hop in my body? How do I get myself to appreciate a spiritual kind of entity that's kind of it's finding its form in human beings, but it's its own autonomous thing. Hip hop is an alien. It's an idea, and ideas, I believe, are from hyperspace. They're from somewhere else. They don't originate on Earth. That's why the idea of the artist is really interesting to me.
It's almost like it was born out of scarcity. Scarcity of resources.
Absolutely.
Almost out of the stress that was created within the Bronx or Queens, whatever you want to say it was created from in New York. And the idea that I think it's just the primal human self-expression where it's your vision, right? So what do you see? You see art. So that's graffiti, that's hieroglyphics. Then what do you say? It's words, it's poetry, it's singing. And then you have movement.
Yeah.
You have your dance, and it's moving your body. And it was just tapping into this inner creativity and expression that everyone has and letting it go.
Wow.
Because there was no other choice. It was just out of necessity, scarcity, and pure youthful energy.
Like catharsis. Like that is literally, I don't know the definition of catharsis, but I feel it in my body when I say it. And it's just the idea that you are experiencing like a revelation, an epiphany when you're participating in it. And like hip hop is cathartic, especially when you even look at those old videos of, you go back and watch Star Wars or like it's an alien landscape and these kids are possessed by an idea called hip hop culture. And that was fascinating to me. And I thought that should be on par in discussion in the theological institutions.
Damn straight.
With Christianity, with Islam, with all, because that's how those began, identified as an idea. Monotheism was an idea. And I mean, the number 0 was an idea.
Yeah.
And we started to build our civilization around these ideas. So hip hop is 45 years old.
It's powerful. Like I will say right now, my life has been shaped because of hip hop.
Me too.
And
definitely.
I'm a board member of this organization called Juice that really teaches the hip hop arts to at-risk youth and even adults now who want to express themselves in a safe environment.
That's awesome.
And that's the beauty and power of hip hop to cross generations and still survive for this long, and will keep surviving as long as I'm here on earth.
Yeah.
I still think it's an amazing thing that you actually took your passion for hip hop to become a chocolatier. I want to ask you, how did you even come up with the idea of chocolate, and how did you find out the process and research how to create chocolate? That's so impressive.
It was really just a blind will. I guess the idea of chocolate didn't come first. It was honestly the first idea was like I was thinking about soap. I was thinking about like sculptures. It took a minute, but you would have to hold the idea of hip hop in your hand. And I was like, how deep can you interact with this idea? So soap was an idea. Like you actually use it as a utilitarian. Like, so you're rubbing hip hop on your body. I was like, nah, that's not, that could get, and then I started, I don't remember where, but it was like, I was introduced to the Mayans and their ritual, their cacao rituals.
Oh, beautiful.
And just knowing that they use psychedelic mushrooms in their cacao rituals, and I was like, chocolate is perfect.
Yep.
It's perfect for this kind of medium, this vehicle. And it was just on. I just kind of put my head down for 5 years and YouTube, learning everything I could about chocolate, about making molds, at that point, I had always been an artist. I've always been creating stuff and not even considering myself an artist. I just couldn't help it. Like, I would just touch shit and it would turn into shit. So this was more of a really conscious, it was a conscious thing that I wanted to turn it into a business, because this is something that I learned later, but I started to really feel the need for like any idea that you have as an artist, you don't want to get paid for it because it's, I think this is my opinion. You don't want to get paid for your art because it's your art. You want to get paid for it because people are moved by it.
Damn straight.
So there's something like, as an entrepreneur, I felt like I have to inject this into commerce. I have to, you know, when people pay for something, they are invested in it, and so I had to slowly learn how to try to be a businessman and start doing marketing. But it was a long road, and I really had learned a lot, which are things that I apply now in my new business. But yeah, the chocolates really refined me as a human being, and it was almost like a part of my self initiation into because I felt responsible for this. Like nobody else is going to do this. Nobody else is going to make chocolate turntables. And I saw the way people reacted to it because I got it right away. I was like, this is a communion for the hip hop culture, and chocolate was the perfect medium. And I was blessed enough to be working in a setting as in like the film and television world, working in like art department, where I was able to work on numerous music videos, and just I met hundreds of artists where I was able to just walk up to them and give them the chocolates, get a photo with them, get their feedback, and it was always amazing.
It's so cool to hear that, Marcus, is that you're so proud of being an artist, and it's almost effortless. It's almost to the point where this is just your true being, and you're just being yourself, and the expression of art is really you being the true essence of yourself. It's just who you are. And I think that's so inspiring for me as an artist, because I feel that we do get stuck in situations where we tend to change our identity to fit certain molds so we can be accepted. Or have the likes and the followers or the plays and buys and sales. You lose yourself, and you lose your art, and you lose your uniqueness. For you, I think it's so impressive also how you've also taken your artistry, you've applied it to UI, UX, and coding, and I thought that was such a cool road and path and skill that you have. And you, as an entrepreneurship is creativity.
It definitely is creativity,
And it's led you to this new venture that I'm excited about, and I would love for you to tell the audience about, because it really is kind of I would say a full circle in a way.
It definitely is. The idea I'm toying with now, which kind of came just like the hip hop chocolates, was thinking about the state and the power of the culture. First, the state, because the state of hip hop culture is facts that hip hop comes from communities where there are broken homes, where there aren't many fathers raising their children, for systemic and lots of reasons that we could talk about that are kind of, I guess, for me, it's about choices, and I've made different choices in my life, but I've been in those environments where I've been confronted with, here's a gun, here's some drugs, this is how you're going to make a living, and this is going to be your life. And I have to decide whether, how far down that road I want to go. And I understand that, in those communities, that's what's happening to these men. And that gangs become a way for them to become men. And they get taken away. They get killed. They get swept away into prison. And what that does is that kind of vibration, that truth gets instilled in the culture. And I think, I guess the street philosopher does partially want to celebrate that, because that's what's created hip-hop culture, that, like you said, the scarcity, that's a part of the scarcity. But I also want to find a healing space to first acknowledge it, that that's what's happening, and then kind of bring about a subtle, it's not a solution, but it's like and for me, I know the things in my life, and I love the idea of homeopathic therapy, where you introduce the smallest, like just a tiny element or a tiny piece of like an oil or an essential ingredient into some water, and And the philosophy behind homeopathic therapy is that becomes the most potent, just that little drop. Like if you put more, it's not as effective. So I was thinking about, the relationship that hip hop has with fatherhood and how there are no fathers. I mean, fatherhood isn't really celebrated, and kind of a symbol of just not a symbol. I wanted to create a symbol of hip hop fathers, so that manifested as creating diaper bags for hip hop culture.
Brilliant.
And it's definitely an extension of the first thought from physics of hip hop, and the second through hip hop chocolates, and now kind of introducing I'm finding out that there are a lot of containers for this idea, just the fathers in hip hop, just being on Instagram and engaging with all of these fathers and dads that are proud to be, a part of the hip hop culture, but also be fathers. And I'm loving engaging in that community. But yeah, I want this bag to be a symbol. Like when people see this bag, I want them in the hip hop culture specifically, whether you're a man or a woman, or whether you have a baby or not, to just be like, hip hop is, my hashtag right now is hip hop is not a single parent.
That's right. Wow.
And that's my art. And to say that has been something I've had to do on my off time.
Yeah.
Because I have a full-time job as a real estate agent and a web developer and just a hustler.
Mm-hmm.
And I guess to your audience, which I know the way you've described it are those that are seeking inspiration to step into their full creative bloom, or, and to that, like, that isn't something I've struggled with until recently, because I guess as I've grown and matured, I knew there was like priorities over, I used to be able to eat a bowl of cereal a day and literally go sculpt. I would be sculpting, making my chocolates, working on, and I had no problem with it. So I've evolved in that sense, but I think, which is kind of linked to the idea of success for me, is just being in love with your vision, your work. And it doesn't matter at what level of financial success you have, but if you have an idea, if something is pressing through you, which usually if somebody's listening to this and they feel a creative impulse, that I feel like you do a disservice almost if you own it until you have to get it outside of yourself, examine it, and let it grow and start nurturing it. That could be a photo, that could be a painting, but you have to start delivering, because it's connected to you, but it's also something coming through you. So
true.
If you want to examine yourself, you have to examine that passion. You have to examine that, and that's something that I've had to learn to balance with just with my everyday life. Because I'm not someone now, I expect to be very soon, who's making a living solely off of my art. But I also feel like I've been blessed because I have been able to take that kind of artistic mentality into like a corporate, semi-corporate setting, or into a business sales setting, and think outside, look for opportunities to think outside the box, to really to be creative, which to me is about perversion. I have to say, that's what it's about to me. Like when today, when I watch a b-boy, like these b-boys are incredible, and I'm addicted to watching b-boys. It's perversion. It's perfectly perverse ways of contorting your body and juggling energy, and that's to me what, like, creativity is being fearlessly perverse.
Wow.
And I think in that sense, it's like it is your, if you feel the impulse, if you feel any guilt about not being creative enough, it's because you haven't explored what is coming forth from you.
That's right. And you made a really good point where you said that if you have this creative urge, you should really act on it. And usually when people have acted on it and taken action, this is when some of the greatest ideas in the world have been birthed.
Yeah.
And also, you can be creative when you do have a corporate job.
Yeah.
The idea of creativity doesn't have to be linked to art. The idea of creativity can be linked to marketing, can be linked to the way you do sales, to the way that you build a company, the way that you talk to your employees, talk to your boss, talk to your colleagues. Yeah. Creativity isn't something that artists can only do. Everyone has creativity. Yeah. There's the creative ways you make your food.
Yeah.
There's creative ways you just comb your hair.
Oh, man.
There's creative ways you change your clothes and wear your clothes. This is just, I feel that a lot of people don't act on their creativity or think of themselves as creatives because they only see it as an artist's way of expressing themselves.
Yeah.
And what's incredible too, Marcus, as we talk about all of this, is that I love the idea how your defining success is just really knowing yourself and just being proud of what you do and expressing yourself and just knowing at the end of the day that you're proud of what you do.
Yeah.
And then you're just out there expressing. And also, I think it's awesome that you have created these different products for hip-hop out of your creativity and your passion for hip-hop.
Thank you.
And I want to know from like your point of view, like when you want to be inspired, what do you do? What's your routine? What's your way into your creative mind, those deep recesses of your soul that can come up with that spark?
You know, this, I believe, for me, I guess a blanket term would be just shamanism. For me to get in touch with whatever I call creative or the archetypal artist in me, I have to lose my mind. And I think hip-hop is a part of that. Like, I mean, at least, you know, I used to create my own little rituals, and on just practicing, I would dance, burn some incense, or I don't have like a specific way of like getting in touch with it now. Meditation, although I don't do it like ritualistically, I have different ideas about how to just loosen my thought process. And there's one idea that's really changed my life, that's helped me enter that shamanistic space, and it's born from Hermes, the Emerald Tablets of
Yes.
Thought. But it was kind of translated by this guy, Robert Anton Wilson, and he sums it up as maybe logic. Maybe logic, where he's like a cosmic comedian. So he talks about you can never tell someone yes, not like yes or no. It's more like a play on perspective. So he's like, I wouldn't approach someone and be like, Kanye West is the best of all time. He's the best rapper that's ever lived. He's like, you have to say, if you are reaching for like a new space where you can let in, you know, that perversion, say Kanye West, maybe he's, you know, maybe he's that. That's not even the best example, but just being prepared to have your perspective exploded, destroyed, which means holding both sides. So maybe logic is like a term that, like Hermes would say, the laws of duality are like any wise person you're able to hold space for its opposite. Otherwise, you're not able to see the relationship that this has to that, or, you know, up has to down. Like Hermes would say, you know, point to where hot begins and cold ends. Point to where left ends and right begins. You can't.
That's right.
Because they're the same thing. So if you point to where this is the best and this is the worst, then if you're on the side of the best, then you're really not on the side of the best because you haven't experienced the side of the worst. So for me, that space helps me stay creative because I'm able to like take in the world, take in my experiences, take in information, and pervert it in a way that I'm comfortable, like kind of being in those uncomfortable spaces where I'm completely kind of somewhere where I naturally wouldn't be, like in my thought process. So it helps me think of things that I wouldn't have thought of before because they're on the worst side.
Yeah.
And in that sense, that's a meditation for me. Like I really love looking at duality, looking at the world and seeing where these dualities meet, but also where they complement each other in their extremes. So I think that's, as an artist or creative, you kind of have to practice that.
That's right.
Or I would even say, if you like really not significant but powerful artists, almost some of them would do the opposite as well.
Mm-hmm.
Like some of them will be like stand firm in their this is the best, or stand firm in this is the worst, or stand firm in the light, or stand firm in the dark. But for me, the ones that it's been said that the most like powerful art has come from people in reverence to God.
Mm-hmm.
You think about like the idea of the Sistine Chapel, or even the Egyptian pyramids, or these things that were built like meticulously from a reverence for life itself.
Yeah.
And that doesn't come from like holding a space against another space. That's like you're bowing down to the idea of life. And I think that cracks you open as a creative. That makes you become a vessel. You can't you can't claim. That's why it's really, I would encourage anybody, if you are like hesitating with your art, it's because of your ego, which I've been told. And that shit broke my heart when I was first, I had a book. I've been writing since I was like 13. I have stacks of journals and poems. I would never read them until somebody told me, they were like, it's your ego that's keeping you from sharing. And I was like, no, it's not.
Oh my God.
They were totally right.
Yeah.
I was afraid to be critiqued. I was afraid to learn from that experience, but I was afraid to basically be judged from who I am, really, because those words were really who I was and who I was discovering. But you have to let it go. Consider it a perversion. You're going to be different tomorrow, and let it go.
Yeah.
It's going to, you don't want it to die inside you. It could really inspire someone else to find their words. And yeah.
That's so true.
I mean, that answer your question.
No, it did, because the inspiration comes from so many different types of, I would say, triggers, or I would say elements in nature. I would say just different things in life and around you. Although the divine inspiration, I think there's something powerful behind that, and you don't have to be religious or Christian or whatnot to get divine inspiration. It's not from the Christian God or Islamic God, but the idea of a higher power that has given you the gifts and powers and a purpose to use your skills for a mission.
Well said, yeah.
That gives you more of a drive to express and create, to not give the world a disservice. It is a disservice almost if you're not expressing yourself.
Yeah.
Because that's what the universe and God has given you for this life to contribute. When you take away society and money and every material things, what you have is you, yourself, and your expression.
Yeah.
And your intelligence and your education, whatever you have, and what can you give and what can you contribute.
Oh man.
And you're born with that, and you can believe what you want to believe. I believe it comes from a higher source.
Yeah.
And these gifts that you do have, it is an instrument that can be used for the good or bad. It can be withheld or it can be expressed.
Yeah. Wow.
And I love how you said that, because I feel it sometimes when I think of myself as an instrument for the universe, for God, for higher power, to change the world through my skills, which has been given to me. I have more of a inspired and purpose-filled motivation to express myself and create, and to do it in the most, I'd say, 100% way.
Yes.
I have to do it 100%, because there is no other way, or else I am doing everyone a disservice.
Yeah.
And I think that you've inspired me just thinking about that, and I just want to ask you, it's like, what is the message you're trying to tell people through your art, through your creativity? What is the message, legacy, imprint in the world and the universe that you're trying to leave?
I guess a part of me is really still unfolding that, but I think my message to myself has been just listen, pay attention, know that, like you said, you have an opportunity to engage with cosmic consciousness. I have this kind of poetic relationship with words, but sometimes I step away from words and just trying to kind of examine myself. So I'm like, okay, if I couldn't talk about this, I couldn't describe this, how would I feel about this? And that's where, like, I think the meditative space can take you. And I think my kind of perspective on like hip hop comes from doing that. Like, what is happening here without me trying to describe it? So I think my legacy, if it were, would be to just be a cosmic listener, be able to listen and perceive perfectly. That's my desire. And I think I was reading today about the idea of the artist, but also the idea of genius. And okay, a lot of people don't know this because it's been kind of removed from, I won't say the Christian Bible, but the idea of the genius comes from, it's connected to the word demon. It's connected through the idea of the daemon. Because, okay, they would see these people, babbling, walking down the street, talking to themselves, and they would say that person's with, the daemon is with that person. And that was like later iterated, it was like mutated into the word demon, but that person would also jump on a piano and just, at 8 years old, they would translate some beautiful piece of masterwork. And I think that there's something in that where you are allowing yourself to be the daemon, to be not like to be a vessel for genius.
Yeah.
And that completely removes ego. And if you are listening, you're able to access the daemon. And I think that's something I myself want to like embody. But I think everybody on earth can operate with a little less ego and a little more genius. And I think that's how you do it. The less ego you have, like look at a baby, a child, they're completely absorbing the world. That's genius. They're able to reiterate it, like reinterpret it and give it to you in refreshing ways. That's a genius because their ego hasn't developed yet. So that for me is just seeing clearly, and which is clairvoyant.
Wow. Just talking with you, Marcus, inspires me to get into a place of full awareness, quiet my mind, and really listen to what's being said around me, in my mind, in my environment, to allow genius to flow through me.
I see it in you already.
Thanks, man. It's like you said, ego does block or hinder that type of flow into your body because you as an artist are vulnerable to critiques and to what other people think of you. That is ego protecting you in a way from danger. And I think as we grow as artists and creatives and just people in general, more and more we realize that what other people think of us does not matter. It's what we think of ourselves.
Absolutely.
And we grow more and more and more when we think more highly of ourselves.
Beautiful. I love that. And I think it's to me, I was seeing more and more how what we think of ourselves eventually becomes what other people think of you. Like whether they interpret it the way you interpret yourself doesn't matter, but they're definitely going to think, they're going to have your perspective. Like, and I can't help but think of Kanye because he definitely is. He's an example of that. Like his example of embracing the shadow without even using that language is kind of genius. There's some genius about his his antics, because he's able to kind of approach a space where he really doesn't care what other people think.
And
so they're thinking the way he thinks. He's like, he's giving it to them whether they want it or not, whether they critique it. No, he doesn't care. And that's there's some genius in that. That's punk rock. That's
Well, Marcus, thank you so much.
Thank you, Mitchell,
for just enlightening me as always.
Not at all.
And everyone out there who's listening, you've just been blessed with some knowledge and some bombs for your spiritual awakening. And just want to say thank you, Marcus, for being here and for talking with me and the audience, and everyone out there who wants to ignite that creative spark. You gotta just listen to that voice and clear your mind and let genius flow.
Yeah.
So thank you.
It.
Just do it. So thanks for listening. This is Creative Haven, and we'll check you out and see you in the next episode. Thank you.
Yeah. Look for me at Physics of Hip Hop on Instagram.
Yes, and everyone who wants to, please visit Physics of Hip Hop on Instagram. Where else, Marcus? Where else can they find you?
That's basically it right now. I'm kind of
Physics of Hip Hop.
The Physics of Hip Hop on Instagram.
Awesome.
And you can find me everywhere from there.
Please follow, like, subscribe, and share from this wonderful man right here. And thanks for listening. This is Creative Haven. I'll see you in the next episode. Thank you. Thank you for listening to the Creative Haven podcast. And if you dig it and like what you heard today, please give us a nice review and rating and share it with one of your friends that you think needs some creative inspiration. You can always find more content and resources at thecreativehaven.com, and hit me up on Instagram at Mitchel Dumlao. And if you want to reach out, collab, or ask any questions, you have my permission to slide into my DMs. So keep positive, continue to learn and hone your craft, and create all day. Salamat.